I never really thought of myself as someone who could just walk away. I've always been the one to stay, to fight through the mess, to make things right, even when it wasn't my responsibility. It's ironic how the people you love the most are often the ones who take you for granted. My family, my parents, and my twin brothers, Nathan and Lucas, never really saw me as more than just a safety net, and it took me years to realize it. Growing up, I was the reliable one, the one who remembered birthdays, paid the bills on time, and kept the house running when mom and dad were too tired or too overwhelmed to care. Nathan and Lucas were the opposites, wild, reckless, and full of excuses. They'd get themselves into trouble, and I'd be the one to dig them out. Dad always said, family sticks together. But what he really meant was that I should keep sticking around, no matter how much it cost me, emotionally and financially. It started small at first. Nathan needed help with his car payments because he lost his job at the warehouse. Lucas couldn't afford his share of rent after getting fired from the bar for showing up late one too many times. I didn't think twice. They were my brothers, and family helps family. I covered their bills, their rent, even some credit card debt that Lucas had racked up when he decided to take a spontaneous weekend trip to Vegas. At first, I thought they'd appreciate it. I expected gratitude, maybe a promise to do better. Instead, they just seemed to expect it, like it was my job to clean up their messes. Mom and Dad didn't make it any better. They'd look at me with these tired, hopeful eyes, like I was some sort of savior meant to keep the family from crumbling. Eventually, I started paying more than just my brother's bills. When Dad lost his job at the factory, the mortgage payments fell behind. Mom's health wasn't great. Her arthritis made it hard for her to keep her job at the diner. So I started covering the mortgage. 1 month turned into 6, and then a year. I stopped keeping track of how much I was spending because it didn't matter. If I didn't help, they'd lose the house. I couldn't let that happen. Sometimes I'd try to set boundaries. I'd tell Nathan he couldn't borrow more money or that Lucas needed to find a job. They'd always promise to try harder, but their efforts never lasted long. One night, I overheard them talking in the living room. Lucas was laughing, saying something like, "Why bother getting a real job? Evie will cover it." Nathan just shrugged and agreed, talking about how I always had their backs. I remember standing there in the hallway, my hands shaking, feeling like I was suffocating. It got worse when Dad sat me down one evening. I thought maybe he wanted to thank me, or, at the very least, acknowledge how much I'd sacrificed. Instead, he cleared his throat and said, "Evie, your mother and I have been thinking about the future. We've decided that when we're gone, the house will go to the boys. They need a place to stay, and you? Well, you've always been independent." I couldn't speak. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "What about me?" I finally managed to whisper. He looked confused. "You're strong, Evie. You'll be fine. The boys need more help. You understand, right?" I didn't. I didn't understand at all. How could he not see that I was the one who'd kept them afloat? I was the one who paid the mortgage they couldn't manage, who made sure there was food on the table when they couldn't be bothered to shop. Yet somehow, they needed the house more than I did. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept spinning with thoughts of betrayal and anger. I kept seeing Dad's face, the way he just assumed I'd be okay because I always was. They'd gotten so used to me being the fixer, the provider, that they couldn't even imagine me needing something for myself. The next morning, I made a decision. I called a locksmith and had the locks changed on my apartment. I needed to set boundaries, real ones. When Lucas showed up later that day, banging on the door and demanding to be let in, I didn't budge. He called me selfish, accused me of abandoning them. I didn't care. I was done being their safety net. The fallout was immediate. Mom called, crying, asking how I could be so heartless. Dad said I was being unreasonable. Nathan left me a dozen angry voicemails. I ignored them all. For once, I wasn't going to be the one to apologize. I wasn't going to let them guilt me into submission. A few days later, Lucas showed up at my building with a can of spray foam. He blocked my door and the lock, leaving me trapped inside. I called the police. When they showed up, he was still in the hallway, shouting about how I'd betrayed the family. I pressed charges. I never thought I'd see the day where I'd have to file a restraining order against my own brother. But there I was. Social media exploded. Mom posted this long, dramatic rant about how I'd turned on them, how I'd let money change me. Comments flooded in from people I barely knew, calling me ungrateful and selfish. I stayed silent. I wasn't going to justify myself to people who didn't know the truth. A few days later, I posted my own story. I talked about the years of financial support, the bills I paid, the sacrifices I made. I didn't name names, but it was clear who I was talking about. The messages I got after that were different. Some apologizing for judging me, others sharing similar stories of being taken advantage of by family. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel alone. I wasn't the villain they made me out to be. I was just someone who finally had enough. And that realization was the first step toward reclaiming my life. After the storm had settled, or at least after I'd convinced myself it had, I started to realize just how much space I'd given them in my life. The phone calls, the emergencies, the never-ending cycle of fixing their problems. I'd built my entire world around solving theirs. Now that I'd cut them off, I found myself surrounded by silence. It was unsettling at first. I'd wake up, half expecting my phone to buzz with another request for money or help. Instead, it stayed quiet. The first morning after the blow-up, I just sat on the couch, staring at my phone like it was some alien object. Part of me almost missed the chaos, like I'd gotten so used to the noise that I didn't know how to function without it. A few days passed, and the guilt started creeping in. I'd always been the dependable one, the one who kept everyone else steady. Now I felt like I'd just abandoned them. I kept reminding myself that it wasn't my fault. They'd been using me. Still, the doubt gnawed at me. Then the messages started coming in. At first, they were just from Dad. Long, rambling texts about how family sticks together and how he never raised me to be so cold. He didn't mention the inheritance, of course, just kept hammering on about loyalty and how the boys needed my help. I couldn't bring myself to respond. What could I say? That I was done? That I was tired of sacrificing while they just kept taking? Eventually, Mom chimed in too. Her tone was softer, less accusatory. She said she was worried about Lucas. Apparently, he'd been out drinking almost every night since I stopped helping. Nathan had moved back in with them, and she was worried the stress would push Dad's blood pressure even higher. I wanted to feel sorry for them. I really did. But all I could think about was how they'd chosen to protect my brothers at my expense. I tried to distract myself by diving into work, taking on extra shifts, staying late, anything to keep my mind off the family drama. One night, after a particularly long day, I walked into my apartment to find my neighbor, Alice, sitting on the floor outside her door. She looked up, her face blotchy from crying. "Locked yourself out again?" I asked, trying to smile. She nodded, sniffling. "And my phone's dead. Can I borrow yours?" We sat on the floor together while she called a locksmith. She kept apologizing, embarrassed about the whole situation. After the call, she sighed, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Rough day?" I asked. Alice laughed bitterly. "My boyfriend left, took half my stuff. I didn't even know he was planning to move out. Just came home to find him gone." I didn't know what to say. I wasn't good at comforting people. I was always the practical one. But something in her voice felt familiar, like that sense of betrayal I'd been carrying. "Do you want to come in while you wait?" I offered. She hesitated but nodded. Inside, I made tea while she sat awkwardly on the edge of the couch. After a few minutes of silence, she started talking about how she'd put so much into the relationship, always compromising, always being the one to fix things. And then he just left. No explanation, no warning. I feel so stupid, she whispered. Like, how did I not see it coming? I sat next to her, my own heart heavy. People get good at hiding who they are, or maybe we just get good at convincing ourselves they'll change. She looked at me, surprised. Yeah, exactly. We ended up talking for hours about family, relationships, the way people take advantage when you let them. It was strange how easy it was to open up to her. Maybe because she was practically a stranger, or maybe because I didn't feel judged. When the locksmith finally arrived, she gave me a grateful smile. Thanks for listening, she said. I didn't realize how much I needed that. After she left, I couldn't stop thinking about how easily she'd opened up to me, how she'd let herself be vulnerable. I wasn't used to that. My family never really gave me space to feel anything, just to do, to manage, to keep everything from falling apart. The next morning, I woke up feeling different, like something had shifted. I started making a list of things I wanted to do now that I wasn't constantly putting out family fires. I'd always wanted to take a weekend trip, just drive somewhere new without worrying about who needed money or who was in trouble. A few days later, I ran into Alice again in the hallway. She looked better, still tired, but more put together. We ended up grabbing coffee at the place around the corner, just talking about nothing and everything. I realized that for the first time in a long time, I was building a friendship on my own terms, without feeling obligated or guilty. It didn't take long for Mom to try a new tactic. She sent me a long emotional message about how Lucas was in trouble with some guys he owed money to. She didn't say it outright, but I knew what she was asking. I almost gave in. Almost. But then I remembered Alice, how she'd been so vulnerable and honest. I decided to be honest, too. I called Mom and told her I couldn't help this time. I explained that I was done being their financial safety net. She didn't take it well, cried and said I was abandoning them. But I stayed firm. After I hung up, I felt a strange sense of relief. I wasn't being cruel. I was just being fair to myself for once. I wasn't going to let them guilt me into carrying their burdens anymore. That night, I texted Alice, telling her about the call. She replied with a simple, "Proud of you." It didn't seem like much, but it made me smile. For the first time, I started imagining a future that wasn't just about keeping other people afloat. I could actually start living my own life, maybe even be happy. It felt strange, but also incredibly freeing. In the days that followed, I found myself slowly getting used to the idea of quiet. At first, it felt unnatural, like I was forgetting something important or missing some urgent call for help. But as time passed, I began to appreciate it. I could sleep through the night without waking up to a panicked text from one of my brothers. I could spend a whole afternoon just reading without feeling guilty about neglecting someone's latest crisis. One evening, I decided to cook something nice for myself, a real dinner, not just reheating leftovers. I'd just finished setting the table when I heard a soft knock at the door. My stomach tightened. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I looked through the peephole, I saw Alice standing there, holding a small potted plant. I opened the door and she gave me a shy smile. "I thought your place could use a little green," she said, handing it to me. "You mentioned once that you always wanted plants but never had time for them." I took the pot, running my fingers over the smooth leaves. "Thanks, it's beautiful." Alice glanced at the table, noticing the two place settings. "Oh, are you expecting someone?" I shook my head. Number I just got used to setting extra places. Old habits, I guess. She smiled knowingly. "Can I join you?" We ended up eating together, talking about everything and nothing. At some point, she started sharing stories from her childhood, how she'd always been the responsible one, too, looking after her younger sisters when their mom worked double shifts. It was strange how similar our stories were, even though the details were different. After dinner, we sat on the balcony, sipping tea. The city lights stretched out below us, and for once, I didn't feel so alone. Alice leaned back, looking thoughtful. You know, I used to think that being strong meant never needing help, that if I could just hold everything together, it would mean I was doing something right. I nodded, feeling the words sink in. Yeah, that's how I was raised, too. Be the responsible one. Don't let anyone down. She glanced at me, her eyes soft. But at some point, you have to ask yourself, when's the last time someone did that for you? The question hit me harder than I expected. I'd spent so long giving and fixing and holding it all together that I never stopped to wonder why no one ever did the same for me. The next morning, I woke up to another round of texts from Mom. This time, the tone was different, less desperate, more resigned. She said they were struggling with the bills now that I wasn't helping, and that Dad was considering asking his brother for a loan. A small part of me wanted to step in, to solve it like I always did, but I stopped myself. They needed to learn how to manage on their own. I knew it wouldn't be easy for them. It wasn't easy for me either. I'd spent so many years defining myself by how much I could give that I wasn't sure who I was without that role. I tried to focus on the little things, buying groceries just for me, redecorating the apartment to feel more like mine. Alice helped me pick out a new rug and a set of colorful throw pillows. It seemed silly at first, but it made a difference, like I was finally claiming the space as my own. One afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before answering. Evie? Nathan's voice came through quieter than usual. I felt a pang of worry despite myself. Yeah, what's going on? There was a long pause before he spoke. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't get it before. How much you did. How much you gave up for us. I didn't know what to say. Apologies from my brothers were rare. Usually, they'd just let things blow over without ever addressing the root of the problem. I've been trying to get a job, he continued. It's harder than I thought, but I'm not asking for money. I just wanted you to know that I get it now. A knot I didn't even know I'd been carrying loosened in my chest. I appreciate you saying that, I replied. He sighed. Mom's been saying you're heartless, but I know that's not true. You just got tired of being everyone's crutch. I get that now. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear hit my hand. Thanks for understanding. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, just processing. It wasn't a full resolution, but it was something. A crack in the wall I'd built around myself. A week later, Alice convinced me to go hiking with her. I wasn't sure I'd enjoy it. I hadn't done anything remotely outdoorsy in years. But as we made our way up the trail, surrounded by the smell of pine and the crunch of leaves underfoot, I felt something inside me relax. We reached a clearing where the view stretched out for miles, the city far below. Alice grinned at me. Feels good to get out, doesn't it? I nodded, breathing in the crisp air. Yeah, it really does. I realized then that I'd been living my life in a constant state of tension, waiting for the next problem, the next crisis. Now, standing there with the sun on my face and nothing urgent demanding my attention, I felt almost free. That evening, I checked my messages to find one from Lucas. He didn't apologize like Nathan had, but he asked if we could talk sometime. I wasn't sure I was ready for that, but it was a start. Progress didn't have to be perfect. It just had to be real. I still didn't know what the future held, or if my family would ever truly see me as more than just a solution to their problems. But I was beginning to understand that I didn't have to keep sacrificing my happiness to keep the peace. Maybe one day they'd figure it out. Maybe not. Either way, I was learning to choose myself, one small step at a time. And as I sat with Alice on my balcony that night, sharing stories and laughter, I knew that I was done feeling guilty for finally putting myself first. One evening, just as I was about to settle in with a book, there was a loud, urgent knock at my door. My heart sank. I knew that knock. It was the kind that signaled trouble, family trouble. I hesitated, hand hovering over the doorknob, before finally opening it. Lucas stood there, looking disheveled and more than a little desperate. He didn't wait for an invitation, just pushed past me and into the apartment. "I need your help," he blurted out. I closed the door slowly, trying to rein in my frustration. "Lucas, I've told you, it's not money," he interrupted, which caught me off guard. He ran his hands through his hair, pacing in the small living room. "I messed up, Evie, big time." I folded my arms, keeping my distance. "What happened?" He stopped pacing, dropping onto the couch. "I got into a fight with some guys at the bar. They were hassling me about the money I owe. One of them smashed my car windows. Now they're saying if I don't pay up, they'll come after me." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Why did you go to the bar in the first place?" He looked at me, his eyes tired and bloodshot. I thought I could talk them into giving me more time. I didn't think it would get violent. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him that this was exactly why I'd stopped helping him. He never thought about the consequences. Instead, I forced myself to sit down across from him. "What do you want me to do?" I asked cautiously. He leaned forward, his hands trembling. "Just talk to them. You've always been good at calming people down. They're more likely to listen to you." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Lucas, you're asking me to negotiate with the people you owe money to? Do you even hear yourself?" He buried his face in his hands. "I don't know who else to turn to. Mom and Dad don't know. They'd freak out." I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to kick him out, let him deal with the mess he'd created. But another part, the one that still cared despite everything, was already working out a plan. Reluctantly, I agreed to go with him to meet the guys the next day. I didn't know what I was hoping for, maybe just to make sure he didn't get himself killed. That night, I barely slept. Alice texted to check in, but I didn't have the energy to explain the situation. When morning came, I felt like a zombie, moving on autopilot. Lucas picked me up in his beat-up car, the windows still cracked from the night before. We drove in silence to the rundown part of town, where the guys usually hung out. As we parked, my stomach twisted into knots. The group was already there, 3 men leaning against a rusty old pickup, smoking. When they saw Lucas, they straightened up, their faces hardening. I stepped out first, forcing myself to stay calm. "Can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. One of the men, tall and broad-shouldered, sneered at Lucas. "You brought your sister to fight your battles now?" I put myself between them. "Look, I just want to understand what's going on. Lucas says he owes you money. How much?" The guy looked me up and down before answering. "2 grand. He promised he'd pay it back weeks ago." I glanced at Lucas, who couldn't meet my eyes. "I understand, but smashing his car isn't going to get you paid any faster. Can we work something out that doesn't involve threats or damage?" The guy seemed to consider it. One of his friends muttered something about just letting it go, but the leader shook his head. "He's been dodging us for too long. We're done being nice." I forced myself to take a step closer. "What if I help him get the money together? Will you back off until then?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Fine. 1 week. If he doesn't pay by then, it's gonna be more than just his car next time. I nodded, swallowing the fear building in my throat. 1 week. Got it. We got back in the car, and Lucas let out a shaky breath. You didn't have to do that. I shot him a glare. Yes, I did, because you clearly can't handle your own messes. You have 1 week, Lucas. Figure it out. He dropped me off at my apartment without another word. As I climbed the stairs, my anger boiled over. I wasn't mad just at Lucas. I was mad at myself for always stepping in, always being the one to fix everything. Inside, I found Alice waiting in the hallway, carrying a bag of groceries. I figured you hadn't eaten, she said with a smile that faded when she saw my face. I let her in and blurted out the whole story. She listened patiently, handing me a cup of tea when I was done. Why do you keep doing it? She asked gently. I didn't have an answer. Because he's my brother. Because I keep hoping he'll change. Alice looked at me, her expression serious. But what about you? You've been bending over backward for people who take advantage of you. When do you get to live your own life? Her words stuck with me long after she left. That night, I lay awake thinking about all the years I'd spent being the problem solver, the fixer. And for what? A family that didn't appreciate it. Brothers who never learned to stand on their own. The next morning, I called Nathan. Can you meet me for coffee? When he showed up, he looked wary, like he expected a lecture. I cut straight to the point. Lucas is in trouble again. Owes some guys money. I helped buy him a week. Nathan sighed. Same old story. I looked him in the eye. Why do we keep enabling him? You moved back home because Mom said Dad was stressed, but you're not fixing anything. You're just putting a Band-Aid on it. We're not helping. We're making it worse. He didn't say anything for a while, just stared at his coffee. I guess I thought if I helped out a bit, it would get better, but it never does. I felt a strange sense of relief. At least I wasn't the only one waking up to the pattern. We have to stop, both of us. Let them figure it out for once. Nathan nodded slowly. You're right. I'll talk to Mom and Dad. It's about time they stop relying on you. It wasn't a complete solution, but it was the first time in years I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. As I walked home, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the start of something different, a chance to finally break free from the cycle. I wasn't sure what the next week would bring, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going back to being their safety net. If they wanted to keep making bad decisions, they'd have to deal with the fallout themselves. And for the first time, that thought didn't scare me. It felt like freedom. A few days passed, and I hadn't heard from Lucas. Part of me was relieved. I didn't want to know if he was making more poor choices, but a sliver of guilt still gnawed at me, wondering if I'd done enough or if I'd just abandoned him. Nathan called me one evening, his tone surprisingly upbeat. Hey, just wanted to let you know that I talked to Mom and Dad. It wasn't easy, but I think they're finally starting to see where they went wrong. Dad's looking into refinancing the house, and Mom's agreed to start cutting back on some of her expenses. Hearing that was like a weight lifting off my shoulders. Really? They actually listened? Yeah, he said, sounding almost amazed. I think seeing you finally draw a line made them realize how much they'd been taking advantage. I even told them that I was planning to move out next month. Mom cried, but I think she understands that it's time for me to live my own life, too. I couldn't help but smile. That's a big step, Nathan. I'm proud of you. He hesitated before speaking again. I should have had your back sooner. I didn't realize how much pressure you were under. I just figured you were fine because, well, you always seemed like you had it together. That made me laugh, though it wasn't really funny. Yeah, I guess I've been too good at pretending, but I'm done with that now. After we hung up, I felt more hopeful than I had in years. I knew that things wouldn't change overnight, But this was a start, a real one. A few days later, Lucas finally texted me, asking if we could meet. I almost didn't reply, but something inside me wanted to see him. I needed closure one way or another. We met at a quiet park, sitting on a bench overlooking the duck pond. Lucas looked rough. His eyes were puffy, and he hadn't bothered to shave. He didn't meet my gaze at first. I paid them back, he said quietly. Sold some stuff, picked up some shifts at the warehouse. It's done. Relief washed over me. I'm glad you handled it. He glanced at me, his expression a mix of guilt and frustration. I know you probably think I'm just gonna mess up again. And maybe I will, but I want you to know I'm trying. I didn't mean to make your life harder. I just. He broke off, wiping at his nose with his sleeve. I always thought you'd be there, no matter what. I never thought about how much that took out of you. I didn't rush to reassure him. Instead, I let him sit with that realization. Lucas, I love you. You're my brother, and I want to see you do well. But I can't be the one holding your life together anymore. You have to want to fix it for yourself. He nodded slowly. I get it, I really do. I've been talking to Nathan, and he's been pushing me to get help. I I think I might actually do it this time. I didn't want to get my hopes up, but hearing him admit it was enough for now. That's good. Just know that I'm not cutting you out. I just can't be your safety net anymore. We sat there for a while, not saying much, just watching the ducks paddle in the murky water. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was an acknowledgement, and that was more than I'd ever gotten from him before. Over the next few weeks, I focused on my own life. I signed up for a weekend pottery class, a small thing, but something I'd wanted to do for years. Alice and I went hiking again, exploring a new trail, and this time I didn't have to force myself to enjoy it. One Saturday morning, I got a text from my mom. Just a simple message saying she was thinking of me and hoped I was doing well. It wasn't much, but it was a change from the constant guilt trips. Maybe Nathan's talk had done more good than I realized. That evening, as I was getting ready for bed, Alice called. Guess what? I signed us up for a 5K charity run next month. I figured you could use a challenge. I laughed, genuinely amused. Me? Running? You're out of your mind. You're stronger than you think, she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Besides, it's for a good cause. I'll be right there with you the whole way. I agreed, mostly because it felt good to say yes to something that wasn't about fixing someone else's life. Maybe Alice was right. I needed a challenge that was just for me. That night, I found myself reflecting on how far I'd come. Just a few months ago, I was buried under the weight of everyone else's needs, barely breathing. Now I was making choices for myself, one small step at a time. The next time I visited my parents, things were different. Mom was quieter, less accusatory. Dad offered me a cup of tea instead of immediately asking for help fixing something. They seemed unsure of how to act around me, but that was okay. I wasn't the same person I'd been before. When Lucas showed up, I braced myself for another round of drama. Instead, he just gave me a brief nod and sat down with the family. There was no tension, no begging for money. He looked almost peaceful. After dinner, Mom hugged me before I left. I'm proud of you, she whispered, catching me off guard. You've been stronger than I ever gave you credit for. Tears stung my eyes, but I managed to keep my composure. Thanks, Mom. I just needed you to see me, not just what I could do for everyone. She nodded, her own eyes misty. I see that now. Driving home, I felt a quiet contentment settle over me. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was constantly bracing for the next crisis. I knew there would still be challenges. Lucas wouldn't change overnight, and neither would my parents, but I'd drawn my boundaries, and I wasn't backing down. Back in my apartment, I set the little potted plant Alice had given me on the windowsill, where it could get more light. It had grown a bit since she first brought it over, new leaves unfurling, stretching toward the sun. Maybe that's how change works. Slow, almost unnoticeable at first, but real and steady. I wasn't fully healed, and I wasn't entirely free of old habits, but I was getting there. I was learning how to let go of guilt and take up space in my own life. Before bed, I set my alarm a little earlier than usual. I'd decided to start jogging in the mornings. Nothing too intense, just a way to build up to the 5K. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: hope. I was finally moving forward, and this time, I wasn't doing it for anyone else, just me.